In the dense heart of the forest, where the sun's golden rays barely pierced the thick canopy, King Lion ruled with wisdom and strength. The towering trees stood like ancient sentinels, their gnarled roots twisting through the underbrush. The air was thick with the mingling scents of earth, flowers, and life, punctuated by the occasional trill of a bird or the rustle of unseen creatures. King Lion, with his golden mane gleaming like molten sunlight, was not merely a figurehead. Unlike many rulers who sat idly on their thrones, he believed in the dignity of labor. Each morning, as the forest awoke to the symphony of chirping birds and whispering leaves, King Lion could be seen striding purposefully across the savanna. His powerful frame moved with both grace and purpose, his sharp eyes scanning the terrain for ripe fruits, roots, and game. He hunted not out of greed, but necessity, storing food in his vast den for times when the forest grew lean. His den, nestled within a rocky outcrop, was a marvel of natural architecture. Its entrance was framed by vines, and inside, the walls shimmered faintly with traces of quartz, reflecting the soft glow of the sunlight that filtered through cracks in the stone. Piles of fruits and neatly arranged cuts of meat lined the walls, a testament to his foresight and tireless effort. His subjects admired him greatly. To them, King Lion was not just a ruler, but a provider and protector. The gazelles whispered of his strength, the monkeys chattered about his fairness, and the smaller creatures took comfort in his justice. Yet, not all shared this sentiment. Envy brewed quietly in the hearts of a few, particularly in Vulture. Vulture was a bird with a sharp beak, dark feathers that glistened like oil under the sun, and an even darker laziness. Where King Lion labored, Vulture lounged. He perched on the highest branches, his keen eyes watching, as others toiled. The idea of exerting himself was as foreign to him as the idea of flight to a tortoise. Instead, he relied on his cunning and opportunism to survive. Though his black feathers gave him an air of foreboding, his hunched posture and slow movements betrayed his lack of ambition. He often chuckled to himself as he watched the other animals scurry about, gathering food and building homes. Why waste energy when there's always someone else to do the work? He would murmur, his voice a low, rasping croak. One evening, as the sky blushed with hues of orange and pink, Vulture's sharp eyes caught sight of King Lion returning to his den. The great beast carried a freshly hunted antelope in his jaws, its lifeless form a prize of strength and skill. Vulture's beady eyes gleamed with greed. He had seen King Lion's den before, but now, with the bounty steadily growing, the temptation was too great. "Why should I hunt when the king has more than enough for himself?" Vulture muttered, a sly grin spreading across his hooked beak. As the shadows deepened, he spread his wings and silently glided towards King Lion's den, his heart pounding with both fear and excitement. And so, the first theft began, setting in motion a tale of cunning, justice, and the ever-watchful eyes of Kwaku Ananse, who saw more than he let on. Vulture, unwilling to work for his own sustenance, found it easier to creep into King Lion's den under the cover of darkness. The forest, alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, became his accomplice, masking his movements as he glided silently through the night. His dark feathers blended seamlessly with the shadows, and his sharp beak moved with precision as he picked through the king's carefully stored supplies. At first, Vulture took only small portions, believing that King Lion might not notice a missing fruit or a slice of meat here and there. But the taste of stolen abundance was intoxicating, and greed began to overtake caution. Night after night, he returned, taking more than before, his confidence growing with every successful theft. Day by day, King Lion began to notice that his meticulously gathered supplies were dwindling. A pile of ripe mangoes that had been untouched the day before now had noticeable gaps. Cuts of meat that should have lasted weeks seemed to vanish into thin air. He furrowed his brow in confusion. Perhaps I miscounted, he thought at first, dismissing the losses as a mistake. But as the days turned into weeks, the theft became impossible to ignore. King Lion's golden eyes grew hard with suspicion. Though his pride refused to admit it openly, the idea that someone within his kingdom would dare steal from him gnawed at his heart. His patience, like his supplies, was running out. One evening, as the forest transitioned from fiery hues of sunset to the calm coolness of night, Kwaku Ananse, the sly spider, happened upon the scene. The forest was alive with the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant calls of owls. From his perch on a low-hanging branch, Ananse's 8 eyes gleamed as he observed Vulture skulking toward King Lion's den. The spider's keen senses took in every detail: the stealthy glide of Vulture's wings, the way he hesitated at the entrance, his head swiveling nervously to ensure he was not being watched. Ananse's small body tensed with excitement. He knew a story worth spinning when he saw one. Ananse muttered to himself, his voice barely a whisper against the nighttime breeze. This will be interesting. A lazy thief, bold enough to steal from the king himself? I must see how this unfolds. But Ananse, ever the trickster and master of timing, chose not to intervene. He crouched in the shadows, his spindly legs still as he watched Vulture disappear into the den and emerge moments later with a bundle of fruits clutched in his talons. The spider's thoughts danced with possibilities. I could expose him now, Ananse mused, but where's the fun in that? Let the thief dig his own grave a little deeper. The more tangled the web, the sweeter the catch. With a satisfied chuckle, Ananse scuttled back into the darkness, his mind already weaving the threads of a cunning plan. He knew that the time to act would come, and when it did, the entire forest would bear witness to his wit and Vulture's disgrace. Until then, he would wait, watching and plotting, his 8 eyes ever vigilant. The next morning, as the golden sunlight streamed through the trees, King Lion called all the animals to a meeting under the ancient baobab tree. Its massive trunk stood like a pillar of wisdom, its branches stretching wide to shelter the gathering crowd. King Lion's deep roar echoed through the forest, silencing the animals' chatter. "Someone has been stealing from me," King Lion growled, his golden mane glowing in the morning light. "I work hard to gather food for myself, yet my supplies are disappearing. I do not tolerate thieves in my kingdom. Whoever is doing this, stop now, or I will find you and make you pay." The animals exchanged worried whispers, their eyes darting around the gathering. Each wondered who among them would dare steal from their mighty king. In the midst of the crowd, Vulture tried to remain unnoticed. His black feathers bristled with unease, and he shuffled backward, blending into the shadows to avoid King Lion's fierce gaze. Perched on a low branch nearby, Kwaku Ananse, the clever spider, watched the scene unfold with great interest. His 8 tiny eyes sparkled with mischief as he raised one of his hairy legs. "Great King Lion," Ananse called out in his smooth, confident voice, "may I borrow a drum for tonight? I have a song that could lighten the mood and entertain everyone in these tense times." King Lion narrowed his eyes, curious but unsure of Ananse's intentions. "A song, you say?" he rumbled. "Very well. Take a drum, Ananse. Let us see if your music holds any wisdom." The animals murmured in curiosity, their tension easing slightly as they wondered what the sly spider had planned. Ananse, with a sly grin, scuttled away to prepare, his mind already spinning a web of clever tricks and secrets. That night, the forest was alive under the silver glow of the full moon. The animals gathered in a wide clearing, their shadows flickering against the trees as they waited eagerly for Kwaku Ananse's performance. The air was cool and filled with the soft rustling of leaves, but all eyes were on Ananse, who sat atop a large drum at the center of the crowd. With his thin, spindly legs, Ananse began to beat the drum, creating a rhythm that seemed to flow through the forest like a gentle stream. The sound was hypnotic, and the animals couldn't help but sway to the beat. Slowly, the melody grew stronger, and as it did, Ananse's voice rose above the drumming. His song was strange and cryptic. The thief is Boarhead, Longbeak, covered in black cloth. If he doesn't stop, he will be disgraced. The animals froze for a moment, puzzled by the strange words. They looked at one another, whispering and trying to make sense of the song. But the rhythm was too captivating to resist. Soon their confusion gave way to laughter and movement as they began dancing to the beat. Vulture, however, reacted differently. As the song echoed through the clearing, his black feathers seemed to ruffle. He shifted uncomfortably, but the pull of the music was too strong. Something about the words seemed to speak directly to him. Before he could stop himself, he spread his wide wings, swayed his long neck, and began dancing wildly to the tune. The other animals cheered and clapped, delighted by Vulture's enthusiastic performance. They joined in, hopping and swaying without realizing the hidden meaning behind the song. But Ananse didn't miss a thing. He watched Vulture closely, his 8 eyes gleaming with knowing mischief. As he kept drumming, his sly smile grew wider. He knew he had laid the perfect trap, and soon the thief would reveal himself completely. Despite King Lion's warning, the theft continued, and his patience ran out. Each morning, he found his supplies dwindling, and his anger grew like a roaring fire. The animals whispered nervously, afraid of what might happen if the thief was not caught. Kwaku Ananse decided it was time to act. That evening, under the soft glow of the moon, Ananse called for another gathering. The animals, curious and uneasy, assembled once more beneath the ancient baobab tree. This time, Ananse arrived with something new, sticky strands of his webbing, and a plan that would end the mystery once and for all. Perched atop the drum, Ananse began to beat a familiar rhythm. The animals swayed as before, caught up in the hypnotic beat. Then Ananse sang his song again, but this time he changed the ending. The thief will be caught, bound by his own shame, and shown to all. The animals, enchanted by the music, laughed and danced without questioning the meaning of the new words. Vulture, as before, could not help himself. The rhythm seemed to pull at him, and soon he was swaying his long neck and flapping his wings, dancing wildly. While the animals were distracted, Ananse quietly began spinning his sticky web around Vulture. With each beat of the drum, he worked carefully, wrapping the bird in the nearly invisible strands. Vulture, too caught up in the excitement, didn't notice the trap tightening around him. Finally, with a sharp tug, Ananse pulled the web tight. Vulture squawked in surprise as he was yanked to the ground, completely entangled in the sticky strands. The music stopped, and gasps erupted from the crowd as they turned to see Vulture struggling helplessly in the web. King Lion stepped forward, his golden eyes blazing with fury. The crowd parted for him, and his deep voice rumbled like thunder. "Vulture, so it was you all along." Vulture flapped his wings uselessly and squawked, his voice trembling. I'm sorry, my king. I was hungry, and your bounty was so tempting. I couldn't resist. King Lion growled low, his mane bristling, but he did not pounce. Instead, he turned his gaze to Ananse, who sat atop the drum with a satisfied grin. You have exposed the thief with your cleverness, Ananse. What punishment do you suggest for this betrayal? Ananse, tapping one of his spindly legs thoughtfully, replied, Great king, let the punishment fit the crime. Vulture should work for you, gathering food and laboring as you do, so he learns the value of hard work and the shame of stealing. King Lion nodded, his fierce expression softening slightly. Very well. Vulture, from this day forward, you will toil as I do. You will gather food for the kingdom and repay what you have taken. The animals cheered, and Vulture, though embarrassed, nodded meekly. He had no choice but to accept his fate. As the crowd dispersed, King Lion thanked Ananse for his cleverness, and the sly spider scuttled away, already thinking of new stories to spin. Ananse, always the clever trickster, grinned slyly. Great King Lion, he said, let Vulture repay his debt by working harder than anyone else. For the next year, he must labor twice as much as the rest of us to refill your stores and learn the value of honest work. The animals erupted into cheers, clapping their paws, hooves, and wings in agreement. Justice had been served, and it seemed fair to all. Vulture, though humiliated, had no choice but to lower his head in shame. I accept, my king, he muttered. From that day forward, Vulture was a changed bird. No longer did he skulk in the shadows or steal from others. Instead, he was seen flying back and forth across the forest, gathering fruits, nuts, and meat for King Lion's storehouse. Day and night, he worked tirelessly, sweating under the sun and braving the chill of the moonlit sky. The other animals watched with amusement as Vulture, once so lazy, now labored harder than anyone else. Look at him now, chuckled Monkey, hanging from a branch. Stealing doesn't seem so tempting anymore, does it? Even King Lion, though stern, allowed himself a small smile as he saw his stores replenished and his kingdom at peace. As for Ananse, he climbed back to his web high in the trees, where he could watch the forest below. Chuckling softly to himself, he thought, what a fine tale this will make. With his cleverness proven once again, his reputation as the smartest creature in the forest remained unshaken. And so, life in the forest returned to its usual rhythm. Though none would forget the lesson taught by Kwaku Ananse, the sly spider who always knew how to weave a story and a trap better than anyone else. Moral of the story, even the laziest among us will face the consequences of their actions, and the cunning often triumph in the end.